scripture will come in the form of a play. We're going to act out the scripture this morning, so I hope you enjoy this.
Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who had poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus that the one he loved was sick.
This sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.
Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days.
Now it's time for us to go back to Judea.
But Rabbi, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?
Are there not 12 hours in the daylight? Anyone who walks in the daylight will not stumble, for they will see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up.
But Lord, if he sleeps, will he not get better?
What I mean is Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.
Let us go also, that we may die with him.
On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles away from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary had stayed at home.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you what you ask.
Your brother will rise again.
I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day.
I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe that?
Yes, Lord. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Mary, the teacher is here and asking for you.
Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would still be alive.
I know, Mary. Show me where you have laid him.
They brought Jesus to the tomb, and he wept. The Jews noticed how much Jesus loved Lazarus, but some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?"
Take away the stone.
But Lord, by now there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days.
Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Let us pray. Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of those who are here, that they might believe that you sent me. Lazarus, come out.
The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face.
Take off his grave clothes and let him go.
This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God indeed. And thanks to Pastor Allen, who gets the award for the best wardrobe change during a live stream. And so thankful for all of our ministry team that has really, really helped with keeping worship as normal as we can make it. And especially, there's behind the scenes, Will and Jay work tirelessly to making sure that Sunday morning is the best quality we could put together with what resources we have. So with that, let us go to the Lord. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight. Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So, social distancing is our new norm. And here in the 5th Sunday of Lent, who's ready for Lent to be over? All right, I never thought that I'd be giving up so much. But does it count if it's not our choice? And social distancing is relevant in today's reading because our lives now, we're kind of like Lazarus to a certain extent. You know, with social distancing, we're living our lives in our caves, in our homes. We're isolated from the world, and we're cut off from physical social contact. So here's some things I've discovered while I'm in my cave. Being in my cave, my diet is out the window. And thank goodness for clergy robes. And being in my cave, I've tested boundaries of personal hygiene. Being in my cave, I've really, really learned to appreciate our school systems so much more. And being in my cave has been especially trying for my spouse. We're now both working from home, and we see a lot of each other. A lot. And to use her words, there's no escape. And she has come to appreciate our time away. So being in my cave has revealed and made me realize now more than ever, I can be a bit intense. And to those around me, it's a lesson of patience. So during these socially isolated days, perhaps we all are uncovering some unpleasantness in ourselves. And I'm not talking about skipping a shower or two, but something smelly nonetheless. Perhaps it's something within our characters. And maybe that something is rancid. And when we're alone, we're forced to look inward, and some nasty things could come out. In today's text, there's 4 points that can help in these uncertain times and perhaps alleviate some stressors and pressures of today. The first thing that comes to mind, and what a fantastic presentation of the word, but the first thing that comes to mind is, where's Jesus in all this? I mean, why does it take him so long to do something? If he really loved Lazarus and his sisters, why did he delay his coming? Why did he drag his feet? For 2 days. And why did Jesus put Mary and Martha through such agony? He knew what was happening, but yet he did nothing to avoid their despair, to avoid their anxiety and their fear. And as we can tell from recent world events, a lot can happen in 2 days. Especially when life and death is on the line. 2 days, that could seem like an eternity. Can you imagine disconnecting from everything for 2 whole days? 2 days without checking on your loved ones. 2 days without checking the news. 2 whole days without being on social media. During this time of a world crisis. And Martha and Mary's crisis, why would the Lord let this happen? Jesus stayed away from them. Social distancing, I guess. Jesus let Lazarus die. And Martha and Mary both expressed this feeling when they said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been there, this would not have happened." Was Jesus being cruel? I mean, if it was in his power to avoid their pain. And perhaps that's a question we're asking now. Where are you, Lord? This disease, this COVID-19, it's attacking the weak, the vulnerable, the elderly, the medically sensitive. How can we not ask, where are you, Lord? Commentator Gerald Borchardt on this text wrote, "We humans generally interpret any delay in rendering help as cruel because our perspectives of the avoidance of all pain and because of our general commitment to the immediacy of action as it pertains to time. We want our way with no pain, and we want it now." But cruelty is not what this story is about. And spoiler alert, Jesus tells us what's about in verse 4. It's for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, God's glory, it's multifaceted. And it's not just about a physical healing, but the physical healing in Lazarus' story is the vehicle in which God's glory is exemplified. So, why did Jesus wait so long? Well, back then, the general belief was that the spirit of the deceased hovered around the body for 3 days. That was because people were anticipating some possible means of the spirit re-entering the body. And on the third day, it was believed that the body lost its color and the spirit was somehow locked out. So the passing of the third day concluded the last bit of hope for the mourners. Why did Jesus wait? It wasn't to be cruel. There was no question. Lazarus was dead. Truly dead. And because of his death, God's and Jesus' glory would be shown. Number 2 from this text, by Jesus going back into Judea, he's putting himself into a dangerous situation. Just previously, in chapters 10, there's an echo of that danger. He tells his disciples, you know that place that just tried to arrest me, and oh yeah, they tried to stone me too. Yeah, let's go back there. And their reaction was, I guess you could say they were concerned. Scared is probably the more accurate statement. Jesus was potentially risking his own life to save someone else's. Now this stunned the apostles, and they reasoned, there was no need to place himself in jeopardy again and again and again. And what was his reply? It was kind of like a little sermon in verses 9 and 10. Are there not 12 hours of the day? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Now, Jesus here was implicitly suggesting to the disciples that they need to deal with their spiritual condition of night by relying on the light of Christ, who literally was standing right in front of them. And it's evident that the disciples were stuck in this fearful condition of being in the night when Thomas made the comment, "Let us go that we might die with him." See, they were stuck in a spiritual stumbling. And how many of Jesus' disciples today are currently stuck in that fearful condition of being in the night? And stuck in their own spiritual stumbling. And the concept of stumbling, it's a term packed with theological significance. It's the term here, the Greek term used here is proskoptein. And that term is linked to the ideas of being offended or falling. Like in the New Testament, proskoptein is a term that carries serious consequences, such as causing the stumbling of your Christian brethren, that's in Romans, or the offense that leads people to stumble, that's in 1 Peter. And sadly, church, there are leaders causing their brethren to stumble. That hasn't gone away. In these dark times, we read or hear about church leaders that are doing just that. This behavior is theologically suspect at best. And sometimes this behavior, it puts lives in danger. And sometimes this behavior puts the Lord to the test. And we mustn't do that, Deuteronomy 6:6. And then when Jesus quoted Deuteronomy 6:6 in Matthew and Luke, this behavior is not the light. This is not where Jesus is. And this is not how God is to be glorified. So where is God today? Where is Jesus? Where's the light in this darkness? Well, today, the light's present with our healthcare professionals, our doctors, our nurses, our EMTs, our medical suppliers, the men and women working long hours on the front lines of this new kind of war. They're answering God's call to save people, and they're providing hope. They're underprepared and ill-equipped, and they're putting themselves in harm's way to save lives again and again. And just like in today's text with Jesus' actions, this is not reckless behavior. Number 3, Jesus calls us out of caves. He calls us out of our graves. Now, when Jesus calls Lazarus, he uses a loud voice and an exclamation point in the text. And that's how he calls us. Now, my wife and I we're actually introverts. People in the church pretty much know that. We don't mind being shut in. That's one of the paradoxes of ministry. Funny, right? Yeah, I know. Yeah, God's funny. He does have a sense of humor. But ministry life for us at times is uncomfortable. Well, that's not really stated right. So ministry life for us can be extremely uncomfortable for introverts. Right, Will? Yeah. But one of the most positive things that's come out of this crisis is that we don't have to explain our seemingly antisocial behavior. So there's that. But one of the worst things for myself and my family is we're medically sensitive. And this coronavirus that attacks the respiratory system, it's really putting present danger for myself, an asthmatic, and for my family members who have autoimmune diseases. So people, please stay home. But Jesus still calling us out into the light. Still calls us out of our comfortable caves and into light. And just as Jesus called Lazarus out, he calls us. But, what if Lazarus didn't come out? What if Jesus says, Lazarus, come out, but if from inside the cave, Lazarus just would have yelled back, no, I don't want to. It's dangerous out there. And it's comfortable and safe in here. I can stream all my videos in here. I can play all the video games I want. I've stocked up on all my provisions, and I've got everything I need in here. I've got a year's supply of toilet paper. Not really. No, not really. But most importantly, maybe he says, if I stay in my cave, nobody judges me, Lord. If I come out, people are going to expect me to be different. And that's the challenge we all face. Jesus calling each and every one of us by name, loudly, with an exclamation point, come out of your caves. Shed that stink of death and sin and all the unpleasantness in our character that we have unearthed, In order to be different people, we have to shed our grave clothes. And to walk in love like Christ so we can be a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. How are we being a pleasing aroma to Christ today? What about our actions to our loved ones? Is that a sweet aroma? Our texts or emails or phone calls, are they a sweet aroma? Or how about our posts on social media, hidden in the comfort of our homes? Is that a sweet aroma? Or do they reek of fear and despair and anger? Do we troll others just to be combative? Or do we spread hate or false information? Do we stink? In times of crisis and life-altering circumstances, it doesn't change who we are. It simply exposes and reveals the essence of our character. And as for me, it reveals aspects of my character that really need to die in the cave. In these troubled times, we mustn't forget that we are the living church, and we must remain diligent in our identity, regardless of our grief, regardless of the hate that's being spewed, the death around us, regardless of our limited human perspectives. And yes, now today being called in the light looks much different than what it did only a few weeks ago. Being called into the light might not be physical. Maybe it's digital. These dark times require the church to embrace new social restrictions. I've watched so many devotionals and streamed so many churches. I've never done this in my life. That's something. We're having a new way to have church like never before. It's a digital home church. And that might be a new medium for us here at the Village Church. But home church has ancient roots. And finally, number 4, John's audience was struggling why Jesus didn't return after his ascension immediately. And Jesus reminds us here that there's life after death. People in John's community were dying. They were asking, where's the Lord? I thought he was coming right back. Where's he going? Why are you letting us feel this pain? And John's text teaches us that no matter what happens in this life, we are his. And Jesus calls us by name. And one day, we will have life everlasting. That's our faith. But having faith doesn't mean that we should develop a false sense of security. It doesn't mean that nothing bad is going to ever happen to us. And it doesn't mean that the Lord's going to physically heal us if we get sick. Can he? Absolutely, if it's his will. And having faith doesn't mean that we're going to be spared from the virus, and we're definitely not going to be spared from death. Newsflash, we're all going to die. None of us is getting out of life alive, mortally, but spiritually, there's life. That's why we shouldn't live in fear. But just because we don't live in fear doesn't mean we should live recklessly. And in times like these, when we're confronted with an invisible foe, let's turn to the advice of Martin Luther that he gave in 1527 with their invisible foe, the plague. Luther pondered in a letter, I shall not ask God mercifully to protect us. I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order to not become contaminated, and thus perchance inflict and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my own negligence. If God should wish to take me, he will surely find me. And I have done what has been expected of me, and so I'm not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. But if my neighbor needs my help, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely as stated above. See, this is such a God-fearing faith because it is neither brash nor foolhardy, and it does not tempt God. Thanks be to God.